There is perhaps nothing more central to the concepts of Final Fantasy X than that of the sending, the ceremonial dance for the departed which sends their souls to the far plane. The first appearance of the ritual occurs in a vivid cutscene, which is one of the most famous and powerful moments of the game. It's the image that appears in the game's logo. It's central to the ending of the story, and it ties deeply to the game's overall themes of loss, grief, and letting go. But where did the concept for a ritual dance for the dead come from? What inspires its appearance and design? And how can we best understand this scene and its importance to Final Fantasy X? To understand the sending, we must understand the Japanese Shinto traditions surrounding dance and the performances for the departed and the divine. Japan's most ancient and sacred text is the Kojiki, a collection of mythic and historical events written down in 712 CE, blending together real events with folk tales and stories of the divine. The Kojiki established a history of the early nation and its first leaders, heroes, and gods. Central to these stories is Amaterasu, goddess of the sun and the sacred ancestor of the imperial family. One of the earliest tales in the Kojiki centers upon Amaterasu vanishing from the world, hiding inside a cave. Doing so removes the sun from the sky, causing chaos. The myriad gods gather in front of the cave and attempt to draw the goddess out, with no success, until another goddess, Ame no Uzume, steps forward. Stepping up upon a barrel, Uzume begins to dance. Her dancing is accompanied by singing from the other gods, and eventually she falls into a trance-like state, dancing wildly and sexually. Amaterasu's curiosity finally drives her to look outside the cave, at which point the other gods pull her out and seal the cave behind her. This dance is said to be the origin of the Kagura, the traditional Shinto dances used to pacify the kami, the spiritual beings that fill the invisible world around us. Over the centuries, these traditions have evolved in vastly different ways, leading to more than 4,000 different styles of Kagura, unique to various cities and shrines, but they all claim as their origins these historical traditions of dance as a way to commune with the divine. The dance Uzume performs in the Kojiki is referred to as an asobi, a ceremony to appease departed spirits, performed at funerals. It is also called a chinkon rite, a purifying ritual meant to pacify the spirits of the dead. In ancient times, chinkon rites were performed by the asobibe, a guild of practitioners whose rituals were meant to pacify the spirits of dead emperors by the performance of ritual song and dance. The songs and poems used in these rituals had intense magical power, imbued by the Kotodama, a complex concept which, in brief, is the name given to the power that's found in words. The dead were in constant need of appeasement. Shinto tradition saw the afterlife and this life as being incredibly close, and the dead as the cause of grief, curses, and illness. The dead and their spirits appear throughout Japanese myths and legends. One such tale is of the Hitodama, the spirit of the recently deceased, which appears in the hours or days after a person's death. This spirit appears as a small ball of flame with a trailing tail, which travels to the people and places the dead person once loved, and vanishes shortly after. Over the centuries, these traditions have blended with native traditions and outside influences such as Buddhism and Taoism, and have become unique schools and traditions with their own styles and names. One of these schools is Miko Kagura, the tradition associated with the sacred dance of Ame no Uzume, performed only by Miko, by female disciples of Shinto shrines. In Japan, the sacred and otherworldly is most highly associated with women. The afterlife and the spirit are yin, or yo in Japanese terms, the dark side of the yin-yang of Chinese Taoist tradition. Women, too, are considered to be more yin than yang, meaning that they are on the same wavelength as ghosts and gods. The Miko and her sacred role in many rites ties into this ancient tradition that sees women as more attuned to the spiritual realm. These Miko wear very specific uniforms called chihaya. While the details may vary based on the shrine, they all follow certain trends. The wide, billowing hakama pants, usually in a bright red or vermilion. The top includes long, billowing sleeves, sometimes dyed a different color than the white of the torso, with the hair pulled up high and a long strip of cloth falling along the back. The Kagura dance may involve the usage of a few sacred tools, called torimono, or things held by hand. These can be incredibly varied, but all of them are considered sacred vessels that help to draw the kami from the other world to this world, enticing them to enter and possess the dancer. They are typically never lowered below the waist, remaining high in the air. They are yorishiro, the passage or channel through which the kami enters the real world. These tools include such a variety as bows, staves, wands, bells, fans, swords, vines, bamboo, and branches of sacred trees known as sakaki. Bells are an important element of these rituals, and bells in general are considered sacred tools whose sound attracts the attention of the kami. Most dancers use wands with bells attached, or hold a bell instrument in one or both hands. The sacred Kagura dance is considered to have multiple parts, most commonly referred to as mai and odori. The mai performance is the spinning portion of dance, taken from the verb mawaru, meaning to go around, performed in the first part of the dance as a means of building up to the appearance of the kami, drawing its attention from the other side. The second style, odori, means to dance, jump, or leap. This style includes more intense motions meant to convey that the dancer has been possessed by the kami, that the spirit has entered the world and is now an active part of the ritual. These styles are very different compared to Western dance. Even the jumps and kicks of Kagura aren't what might be called jumping or kicking in Western dance. While traditions vary, there's a tendency towards downward motion, a focus upon the connection to the earth. The dancer is not so much leaping into the air as stomping on the ground, which is called henbei, or magic steps. The torso tends to stay still and upright, while the knees bend and the legs shift outward, a posture called ashikoshi. The music that accompanies these performances is incredibly powerful. It centers upon the usage of 3 styles of drum, the large, small, and rhythmic, or odako, kodako, and daibyoshi. The drum is the heart of the dance, the sound that summons the kami and sets the rhythm for the entire performance. Alongside the drum is the flute, or kagura-bue, a transverse bamboo flute with 6 or 7 holes that has a very distinct and sharp sound. This group of musicians, or hyoshigata, may include a singer who performs saibara, a style of poetry written in the tanka format that was used in Japan's most ancient sacred texts. These songs are the magical words that summon the kami, invoking the kotodama to pull them to this world. Another term for the songs, kami uta, uses the symbol that refers to ancient poems or songs from the Heian period, which derives from the verb utsu, to appease or to placate. These building blocks are used to create hundreds, perhaps thousands of variations on the same myths and folk traditions across Japan and its myriad schools of Kagura, some associated with temples, some secular and more focused on entertainment, but all of them have their roots in these ancient ways of reaching out to the other side, to set the departed at rest, and perhaps to help the living to mourn. In Japanese, the sending is referred to as ikai okuri, meaning other-world sending. The verb okuru can mean to send in the sense of sending a message, but it can also refer to the sending off of the dearly departed, of saying farewell to the dead. This double meaning ties the dance directly to ancient traditions of kagura, of a dance for mourning, and for ensuring the spirit's safe passage to the other side. These souls that we see departing, the fireflies, are incredibly similar to the concept of hitodama, the soul fires that leave the recently departed. Yuna's dance ensures these fireflies will rest easy in the far plane, rather than remaining in the living to torment those left behind. All these ideas have direct parallels with Shinto and Japanese beliefs, to the kagura dances and the belief in impurities, the possibility of evil arising from vengeful dead spirits. The first time we see the sending, the performance begins with Yuna entering the water, walking across the surface in a vivid scene that emphasizes her magical ability and the sacredness of this moment. She is barefoot, and her feet pull along the surface of the water without rising away from it, a movement similar to the yosei ashi of kagura tradition, or the gliding steps. This involves walking across the stage with the left foot forward, sliding the right foot forward without leaving the floor. Below the surface we see the dead in their coffins, arranged in a circle which Yuna comes to stand in the center of. She will not move away from this central space, which takes on the role of the sacred space in kagura, the Kami no Kura, a holy place in which the world of the Kami and this world become one. Her dance opens with the Mai of Kagura, the spinning dances. She twirls in place, torso high, the staff in her hand spinning in her lifted arms. Her billowing sleeves, similar to the sleeves of the Chihaya, emphasize her movement. Her dress is not inspired by Chihaya, however. It's modeled after the furisode, the traditional dress of a young unmarried woman in past centuries. The dress and sleeves are explicitly designed to emphasize Yuna's movements in this dance. Both of them flow outwards and around as she spins in place. The spinning is a method of purifying sacred space to prepare it for the arrival of the kami. Whilst dancing to attract the spirit's attention, the dance also safely paves the way for their arrival, so that they may listen to and hopefully answer the prayers of those gathered. The spinning is mirrored in the actions of the fireflies, who begin to circle inwards as Yuna dances. The moment she begins to dance, a song begins to play. The music is heavily inspired by Shinto songs, the heavy drums, the deep chanting. The words that are sung are essentially gibberish. While real Japanese letters are used, they spell nothing when read horizontally. However, if you read them vertically, as Japanese typically is read, then the real meaning is revealed. Faith, dream, Yu Yevon, pray. Please grant prosperity without end. The song is called the Hymn of the Faith, or in Japanese, the Inori no Uta, using the same symbol for song that is used to refer to the sacred poems of the Heian period and the sacred songs of Shinto tradition. The performance involves the use of a bell. The storyboards for the sending reveal early consideration of Shinto influence in the usage of the bell, which is said to ring solemnly as Yuna moves. In kagura, this is called suzufuri, or bell shaking. The end of Yuna's staff, her torimono in Shinto terms, has a bell attached. The staff itself acts as the device which connects the divine to the mundane, allowing the otherworldly to enter into and possess Yuna. This possession is metaphorically shown in the way the dance changes midway through, the shift from mai, or spinning, to odori, the dancing and leaping. The water beneath Yuna suddenly rises, the fires turn blue, and her motions become more powerful, involving more movements of her legs in which she pulls her feet across the water to various corners. While the water does not have corners per se, it's clear Yuna's motions involve such theoretical dimensions. Kagura dancing involves using the corners of the stage as metaphorical representations of the four directions, the elements, and other pieces of the real world. Purifying these corners is often central to Kagura dances and their kata, or traditional movements. The Shiho Gatame, for instance, involves a walking pattern from the center to the corners of the stage in order to purify each corner. This dance is a performance, but it is also a communal activity. Yuna is not alone in this moment. She is surrounded by the people of Kilika and her guardians. In the final moments, all else fades away as Titus, the proxy for the viewer, approaches Yuna on the water. There is union in this moment, representing the union of community and kami that comes from the Shinto dances. In ancient Japan, there was no separation between the performer and those watching the performance. No stage and audience split which kept them apart. In the ancient myth, Ame no Uzume danced to the wild chanting of her enthralled crowd. They are part of the scene, and the sending ends with the sense that everyone's feelings, their sorrow and grief, has brought them all together in this beautiful and terrible moment. Understanding the history behind the sending makes its impact more powerful and helps explain why this short scene is so deeply moving. Nothing better represents the journey of Yuna's pilgrimage, or the bittersweet tragedy of love and loss that is central to Final Fantasy X, than this sacred dance that brings people together to say goodbye to those they love.